Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
Arctic Wire Rope and Supply, an Alaskan company providing quality lifting and rigging products since 1983, manufacturing custom wire ropes, chains, and nylon slings here in Anchorage, on the web at arcticwirerope.com.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service. It is the 4th of December. As always, we encourage you to visit our website for the very latest weather information for your community and village. You can always do that at arh.noaa.gov if you like to look at the entire view of Alaska all at once, or simply go to weather.gov and click on Alaska, and that will immediately take you to, assuming that you clicked in the right spot of Alaska, your nearest Weather Service forecast office, whether that's for the interior and the Fairbanks office, South Central and Southwestern Alaska, if you look at the Anchorage office, or Southeast. And that'll hit you up with the Juneau National Weather Service office. And in the meantime, you can always head to YouTube. If you go to the NWS Anchorage page, you'll get a brief introduction to what the weather is going to do over the next couple days. That's kind of what you might hear on statewide radio as well. We'll give you the forecast slides on that YouTube presentation. And then right after the show, probably about 15-20 minutes later, you can get the entire Alaska Weather Show on YouTube. If you search AKWX TV, that's brought to you in part by this channel, Alaska Public and KAKM. So be sure to check that out and bookmark that. Maybe you missed a show someday or don't have the DVR set. You can certainly do that online later on in the evening. Find each Weather Service office on Twitter and, of course, on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska. And right now, no matter what part of Alaska you're in, with the exceptions of Southeast that look pretty dry today, we would love to know what kind of precipitation you're seeing. So if you're in South Central especially and western parts of Alaska, we would really like to know, what are you seeing in your part of Alaska? Radar does not tell the entire weather story around here. The satellite picture, of course, doesn't tell us what's going on necessarily under the clouds all the time. And boy, those weather observations all around the state are scattered in many corners of the state, but it is a big, big place, as you well know. So your reports make all the difference in helping to get your forecast right and accurate for your area. Around Southeast, no watches, warnings, or advisories right now. For South Central, though, freezing rain advisories all the way from the Mat-Su valleys through the Anchorage Bowl and down to the western parts of the Kenai Peninsula. That's going to go through the evening tomorrow. Looking for most areas to pick up under 1/10 of an inch. So we're not talking about heavy amounts. This is not expected to be a repeat of what we saw last time that made the roads so awful, but there could be some slick spots. And because of that, be extra careful if you're headed out tonight, headed out in the morning tomorrow, headed out through the afternoon tomorrow afternoon into the evening hours. There will probably be some slick spots on most of the major thoroughfares there and probably in the communities as well. So just give yourself some extra time and certainly some extra space as you're driving around, and watch those walkways and steps out there. They're going to be a little bit slick. Looking farther northward, winter storm watches there in the orange color all the way from the Brooks Range and parts of Kotzebue Sound eastward toward the Arctic Village, Fort Yukon, Fairbanks, and the Tanana Valley. Expecting freezing rain that could add up to about 1/4 of an inch. That's a little more substantial there, a little bit more than what we're talking about for South Central Alaska. That will begin as we head into tomorrow. So watch for that and watch for more updates as you go throughout the day. As you get your weather information from the National Weather Service there, you can do that again on Twitter or by heading to weather.gov and clicking right about in here, and you'll be taken to the Fairbanks National Weather Service office. Winter weather advisory for the northwestern coast around Wainwright down toward Point Hope and the northwestern slopes of the Brooks Range. Also have winter storm warnings for the interior of the Seward Peninsula just north of Nome and just south of Shishmaref and the Kotzebue Sound region, and also for the lower Yukon Valley there around Galena, north and south, almost to McGrath. Areas around the lower Kuskokwim Valley are under winter weather advisories at this point. Again, all for the possibility of a wintry mix, including some sleet and freezing rain potential there. Not a whole lot of snow with this just yet, and it does look like most of this is going to be that dreaded wintry mix kind of setup. So a lot of warm air overrunning some very stable cold air at the surface, brought to you in part by that big cold letter H out across the Yukon Territory. Here's a weather setup as we start out in the west as usual across the Bering Sea. You can see a very substantial southerly flow moving across the eastern Bering Sea. Several circulations notable here around the Kamchatka Peninsula, another one well south of Unalaska Dutch Harbor. You can see another circulation here south of Shemya. And that is bringing up an awful lot of warm and wet air over the west coast. And what we don't see in this picture is the large area of high pressure that is just dug in across western parts of the Yukon. And it's going to stay there throughout the part of the weather story that we're focusing on tonight and into the next 2.5 days or so. As that continues to sit right about here, Dawson and Whitehorse, 1044 millibar high, that has dropped a nice curtain of cold air across the entire landscape. But all the warm and wet Pacific air is running up the west coast. As you'll see here when we look at the upper air charts in just a minute, we've got a circulation of low pressure here and high pressure out across the east, and it's just acting like a beautiful moisture and warm air conveyor belt across the west coast and now into parts of south central and eventually parts of the interior. Even northwestern sections of Alaska will get in on this interesting weather experience. So yes, it is cold enough to snow. The problem is not all layers of the atmosphere are cold enough to snow, and this presents a problem again for what we would like to call normal Alaska winter. This is not unusual, but it is maybe a little bit unwelcome. As we look out across the west, you can see low pressure here getting closer to Shemya. As this works across south central Alaska in the coming days, the winds will come up as well, and we expect that probably by tomorrow there may be some storm force winds there across the central Aleutians. We'll cover that when we talk about your marine weather forecast here in just a few minutes. But for southeast, what a treat. Most areas are seeing partly sunny to a mostly cloudy kind of day. Not terribly wet, though, as a trough of low pressure is keeping things relatively dry across your area right now. And high pressure situated a little bit farther north is keeping a lot of cold air over your area. So while it has been dry, it has been pretty cool. Temperatures in the teens and 20s in some cases there across southeast. We'll take a look at the temperatures here in just a moment. Here's a look at today's weather map. Low pressure here sitting south of the central Aleutians at 993 millibars. Warmer air also working itself toward the Gulf of Anadyr, that wrapping into a low of 992 millibars. Here's our big weather player at 1044 millibars. Rough, tough, and hard to bluff. Cold air situated across the interior. Not uncommon for this time of the year, but what we do have is a lot of warm air working up the west coast and overrunning this, and so we saturate the top of the air down to the bottom. As that happens, we have moisture falling into that very cold air mass that's colder down here than it is up here. So it may start out as snow and then turns into rain, and then at the last second, unfortunately, it freezes on contact with cold surfaces, and that can certainly make a slick, glazy mess. Out across the west, cold enough for snow there across Shemya. It might turn into more of a freezing drizzle or rain situation there across the western tip of the Aleutians later on tonight. You'll notice a broad swath of freezing rain potential all the way from the western tip of the Seward Peninsula across the Yukon and Kuskokwim valleys and into south central Alaska and up and down the Cook Inlet. Around Kodiak Island, it looks like most of that's going to be rain for you. Same goes for Prince William Sound southeast. You're looking dry tonight, but cold with high pressure just to your north. And you can see the front slowly creeping eastward across the Aleutians. Watch what doesn't happen across the next 2 days. This front barely creeps eastward at all, so we're not going to just turn this whole system off. It's going to linger across the west and central parts of the state as we go into Thursday and Friday. High pressure will try and develop here across the eastern Gulf. We've got a trough situated across the Pacific Northwest that's snaking its way up towards southeast. Dry and cold weather across the Yukon and the eastern interior and a large part of southeast. And periods of rain and snow. That would be freezing rain and snow across some parts of the interior all the way to the Alaska Range, and rain expected across the west coast with that frontal boundary barely budging. Out across the west in the Gulf of Anadyr, there's that 989 millibar low trying to disconnect itself from the entire weather picture, but by and large it is that warm and wet air moving up the west coast over the cold air in the interior and into the Brooks Range. That will present more areas across the north with snow as we get into Thursday night and Friday. There will be pockets of freezing drizzle across the interior. Some snow showers may develop up around Arctic Village and points east and even north of Eagle. And as you get in south central, we're still looking at the opportunity for snow and freezing drizzle as we go through the end of the week for South Central. Parts of the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak, the Alaskan Peninsula, still looking at some rain. But places like the St. Matthew waters around the Pribilofs, all looking at the opportunity for freezing precipitation. That would be freezing rain as we go through the end of the week. So what a mess, and again, a little bit maybe unusual for December, but not unheard of, I guess I should say. For the afternoon temperatures then, look at the cold. Teens and 20s for Southeast, 37 in Sitka, 20s and 30s all the way down toward Ketchikan and Annette. You better believe it's cold there. 20 in Juneau. Yakutat 19, teens, 20s, even 30s around Prince William Sound. It looked like Cordova was pretty chilly earlier today. 20s up and down the Cook Inlet. We saw some rain turning into freezing rain there around Kenai. That spread northward as the afternoon went on. 5 in Healy, 5 below in Fairbanks, 21 below in Eagle, and 14 below as you head down toward Northway. Greeley was showing 1 above. Arctic Village gets cold spot honors this, I'm sorry, that would be Fort Yukon gets cold spot honors this afternoon. 24 below there, 18 below in Arctic Village. We got that right now. Kaktovik showing 19, Barrow only 9. Teens and 20s for the northwest Arctic coast. Cape Lisburn about 22. Around the Kotzebue Sound region, lower 20s did the trick. 29 there around Nome. Unalakleet was showing 23. McGrath 21. Galena in the mid-teens. Around Norton Sound, temperatures were in the 20s and 30s, but if you go a little bit farther south, you saw temperatures in the upper 30s to about 40 degrees around Dillingham and King Salmon. The Pribilofs in the lower 40s with fog and rain this afternoon. Mid-40s to almost 50 degrees for a large part of the Alaskan Peninsula. Chignik 46, and the central and western Aleutians were just shy of 40 degrees. Here's overnight low temperature predictions now, anywhere from 10 to almost 25 below across the eastern parts of the interior. But now with that warmer, wetter air working over the west coast, look at the sizable temperature jump as you head out toward the Bristol Bay area. Temperatures just shy of 40 overnight, 31 in Nome. 19 there around Kotzebue, 9 in Barrow. The Pribilofs, lower 40s, 30s for the Aleutians. Kodiak, you're looking at 37. And for Southeast, wow, teens and 20s. You'll be looking at some pretty chilly temperatures there overnight, as well as Yakutat at 9 above, 34 above by the afternoon. 20s and 30s with some areas in the inner channels there. Even Juneau looking at temps below freezing again for highs tomorrow. 20s and 30s for South Central. Kodiak 43. Anchorage looking at about 28 degrees, 26 in Talkeetna, teens and 20s for the interior, including Fairbanks. Still looking at temps sub-zero there for Fort Yukon and Arctic Village, and teens mainly for the Arctic coast, with temps at or just above freezing for some parts of the west coast. But where it's not, that freezing rain potential will linger tomorrow. Look for flying weather to be at least MVFR for most of the interior and the west coast, looking at widespread IFR, especially for the YK Delta, parts of Bristol Bay, and south of the Alaskan Peninsula and the Kodiak Island region. Past conditions then, we expect to see developing MVFR as we go through the northern passes. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, at least MVFR, IFR to start on the eastern side tomorrow. Rainy Pass, MVFR, we expect that to continue as we go into Windy Pass and Isabel Pass for your Thursday. Mentasta Pass likely VFR. We'll see conditions change in Tanita Pass, Portage Pass, at least MVFR, and Chilcoot and White Pass should be VFR as well. You can see that warm and wet air lifting northward across the Chukchi Seacoast by tomorrow afternoon. The surface freezing line undercutting that. That's our overrunning situation. Because of that icing potential, especially in the freezing rain areas, could be isolated to occasional severe. So be very careful and make sure you know the weather before you go tomorrow. Ridge of high pressure stretching all the way across Alaska. Large dips in the jet stream to our west and to our east. And that is locking in that warm air, especially in the west, and giving the lower 48 a huge dose of cold air. They can enjoy that for a few minutes, right? Sure, no problem. Back to the west, low pressure at 9,000 feet, just east of the Kamchatka Peninsula. Here's our ridge across the Gulf of Alaska, really trying to lock in this pattern at least through the end of the week. You can see very little change there at 3,000 feet, more of a northerly drainage flow across southeast, and that warm and wet air conveyor belt across the west there with wind speeds anywhere around 40 to 50 knots at times. Turbulence potential mainly below 3,000 feet across the west coast, a little bit higher there across the southern tip of the Alaska Peninsula and the eastern Aleutians. Not much of a threat across the eastern parts of the interior or southeast. And as you would expect, the sea ice edge is growing. We'll talk about that and more coming back with your marine weather forecast here in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Peranto. Today we're going to talk about the Voluntary Observing Ships Program, or VOS program as it is sometimes called. Now, the ships that are participating in this program provide much needed observations to both the marine and the scientific communities. And today I have Larry Hubble in studio, and he's the Anchorage Port Meteorological Officer, and he's going to discuss the importance of the VOS program here in Alaska. Welcome, Larry. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for inviting me.
So what is the purpose of the VOS program in Alaska?
Well, the Earth is covered by over 70% water. Alaska has a huge coastline. Very important to all of our customers to find out what the weather's doing out there. And we've developed a program to gather meteorological information to provide actual on-scene weather condition reports from all of our stormy waters. And it helps our forecasters do a better job providing accurate forecasts.
And what kind of information is gathered by these ships?
The ships can volunteer and report to the extent that they're available and to the extent that they have the equipment. But they give us their latitude, longitude, wind conditions, pressure, temperature, humidity, icing, ice conditions, wave heights.
A lot of information.
Weather, clouds.
Wow.
Some ships don't care to participate at a full level, but wind and pressure and temperature are very important to us.
Yeah, well, as a forecaster, I know that is very important to the operational forecaster when they get that kind of information to do the forecasts. Yes. What types of ships participate in this program?
Seems like we go after almost anything that floats. we love the container ships, the tug ships that are hauling fuel and cargo up there. They really support and serve Alaska. We encourage all the tugs to participate, and we have the cruise ship industry has really been good to us. The Alaska ferries. We have research ships. NOAA vessels actually we have 3 of them home ported in Alaska waters. There's the tanker trade going into Valdez is very important to us. We're on a major shipping route. The Great Circle route between the western United States and Asia actually goes through Alaska water. Many of the container ships are very important to us.
So you talked about the type of information that is being gathered. Now, how is this data being collected on the ships?
You know, the ships have a package of weather instruments. Most of the major ships have weather equipment on board, and so one of our primary methods is a computer software program called Amber Seas that we provide free of charge to the ships. And it provides an easy coding method to get it into the World Meteorological Organization code. And they'll type in the parameters, temperature, wind, and pressure, and it codes it up for them, and it puts it in a format ready to transmit.
And this equipment is free of charge, right? I mean, I
Yes.
think it's important to stress that, you know.
Free of charge. Some of the ships maybe don't have the computer equipment, not really equipped to be a major contributor, and they'll look out their cabin window and estimate the sea conditions. They'll have a thermometer, and they may contact us via HF radio or VHF radio.
And when they're transmitting the data, that's also free of charge, is that correct?
It is. We pay for the satellite costs via Inmarsat-C or Inmarsat-A, and one of the things that we pioneered in Alaska was receiving ship observations via email. And we've been doing that for about 6 years now, and we get up to 7,000 emails a month.
Wow.
From around the world. This thing has gone worldwide, and Alaska is the portal for email observations from around the world.
That's incredible. That's outstanding. You have this contest that you guys have come up with up here in Alaska, and I think it's fascinating. Tell us about the contest.
Many of our marine community are competitive by nature, and we decided to have some fun with that, and we get the individual ships and tugs competing with one another. Sometimes we'll have a Crowley competition or a Horizon Lines competition to see who can take the most weather observations. And some have asked how many weather observations can we take, and I'll say send us 24 a day. We'll take one an hour if you have time. And we're thankful for those that just send one a day or a few a month. But the ships like to be number one, and so I have a global league that all the top ships in the whole world are competing in my league, and I have a Horizon Lines league, and I have a certain tug leagues, and it's been very fun, I think, for both them and me as well, because the numbers have keep going up every year.
What's the record, the world record? Is there? I can't remember if it was Arctic Sun had was it 4,000 or something like that?
Yeah, the Arctic Sun continues to set a new world record. They're an LNG tanker that travels between Nikiski and Tokyo, and they broke the new record last year in '06 with over 4,100 observations, and here it is in March of 2007, and they're on a pace to do maybe 6,000 this year if they keep going. These are some competitive men aboard this ship.
That's outstanding. How many ships participate in the VOS program now in Alaska?
We work with about 300 ships, and normally we're trying to get more every year. And
what about in the United States?
The United States program has about 1,000 ships that are in the VOS program.
Okay, and this is a global program, so how many worldwide are participating in the program?
I feel like we have the United States has the premier VOS program, but worldwide we have about 4,000 ships.
Okay, that's a lot of ships. There's a lot of water, so that's good information to be able to get those observations from those ships. Now, how can a ship owner out there get involved in the VOS program?
We have 3 port meteorological officers in Alaska. Those are good contacts.
You being one of them.
Larry Hubble here in Anchorage.
Yeah, it's
and
you.
Rich Courtney in Kodiak.
Okay.
And Deborah Elliott in Valdez. We'll provide the phone numbers, and email is a good way to contact us. Phone number.
Okay.
Contact a local weather office in Alaska. They'll be happy to get you started.
Kind of point you in the right direction. There's also a website, I believe, right? A national website that people can maybe go to get more information. Is that correct?
It does give a nice overview of the program and a description of the software and the scope of what might be required.
Okay, great. Well, Larry, thank you for coming in today. It's been a pleasure. I've been wanting to get you in here for quite some time, and I think people in Alaska want to know more about the VOS program, so hopefully they have learned more by this segment, and maybe we can get some more ship owners involved in the program. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the mariners that are supporting already.
Great. And if you want to know more about the VOS program, we mentioned the website. That is www.vos.noaa.gov. You can go there and get more information about the VOS program. There's also a couple email addresses that you can look at either for submitting data or retrieving data. And again, Larry, thank you for coming in today. And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Thanks, Jim. Here's the marine forecast now for southeast. We're going to have some gusty winds across the Lynn Canal tomorrow, and winds up to 40 knots or so coming out of the north with stronger gusts in the region. 8-foot seas there, more of a northeasterly flow around Petersburg with a 5-foot sea, and northerlies coming into the southern interchannels with a 4-foot sea. Offshore winds not too bad, about 15 to 25 knots or so, mainly from the north and east. Some lighter winds a little bit farther south toward the Dixon entrance. As we get into Friday, the winds let up just a little bit there across the interchannels, 15 to 20 knots or so from the north and northeast primarily, and more of a westerly onshore flow as that trough of low pressure sitting right along the coast. More of a northeasterly flow, though still around the Dixon entrance with a 5-foot sea. As we get into south central, the winds are going to be variable around Prince William Sound and the northern parts of the Cook Inlet in the sea ice-free waters. Overall, though, winds from the north and east will be predominant across the north and westerly parts of the Gulf, Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, around 20 to 30 knots or so. 6 to 8-foot seas, almost 9-foot seas there as you get into the eastern side of Kodiak Island, and 3 to 6-foot seas there in the Cook Inlet and Shelikof Strait region. As we get into Friday, more of the variable winds will continue across Prince William Sound and the northern parts of the Cook Inlet. The western Gulf still has relatively light winds there between 15 and 25 knots with seas between 6 and 9 feet. Shelikof Strait west of the Barren Islands, you're looking at 5 to 7 feet there with 25-knot winds or so just west of the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula, and 25-knot winds coming down the central parts of the Cook Inlet there west of Kenai with a 5-foot sea as we wrap up the week. Across the Alaska Peninsula, you're looking at a south and easterly flow, about 20 to 30 knots or so, 5 to 8-foot seas on the north side, 9 to 11-foot seas on the south side, more of an easterly flow south of Sand Point. Getting into Friday, a broad easterly flow continues there from Bristol Bay all the way down toward King Cove and Sand Point. Winds and waves are picking up to about 14 to 18 feet there on the Pacific side. 9-foot seas expected north of Cold Bay with a 35 35-knot wind. Across the Aleutians, a broad westerly flow all the way from Shemya to Adak and Atka with 10-foot seas on the south side. Notice more of a northwesterly shift here west of Nikolsky and east of Atka. You're looking at more of a west and southwesterly flow around Unalaska and Nikolsky there with 11-foot seas expected. Watch what happens as we get into Friday. Storm force winds there mainly between Atka and Nikolsky. 19-foot seas are expected. Looking at a northeasterly flow south of the eastern parts of the chain, a north and northwesterly flow on the north side of the chain, and winds are already coming back around to the west and southwest across the western and west central parts of the Aleutians as we get into Friday. Those down to 20 to 30 knots. Across the west coast, a south and easterly flow following that upper level pattern that's bringing warm and wet air to the west coast. Seas running around 9 feet there closer to the coast. St. Matthew and Pribilof Island waters looking at 8-foot seas as we get into Thursday. And the wind shift just a little bit on Friday, looking at mainly 25 to 35 knots across most of the northern parts of the Bering Sea. Around the Pribilof zone, northerlies develop around 40 knots with a 12-foot sea. Across the Arctic coast, ice now across all zones there with wind speeds light across the Beaufort Sea. The Chukchi Seacoast looking at winds between 25 and 35 knots blowing offshore from the east and southeast. And more of a predominant east and southeasterly flow on Friday as weather is feeding into that large area of low pressure across eastern parts of Russia there. Again, 20 to about 25 knots as we wrap up the week. Recapping your weather tonight, the main issues are freezing rain pretty much from the west coast into the interior and south central tonight. That will continue to be an issue as we head through the rest of the week. A large part of the interior is under a winter storm watch for up to a quarter-inch of ice, including places around Fairbanks as we get into Thursday and Friday. For south central, freezing rain advisories are in effect. Those will go until 6 o'clock tomorrow night. And ice storm warnings across some parts of the interior and the west, including areas around the Yukon Valley there. So check your local forecast from weather.gov simply by clicking on Alaska. You get the very latest, or cue this up on YouTube to get more information in case you missed the beginning part of the show. You're looking at an opportunity for some snow and freezing rain as we go through Thursday. More rain across farther south and western locations. Southeast looks dry but cold as we put a wrap on the week. The stationary boundary lingers across the west coast. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.